Please be aware this will be a spoiler-filled discussion. What are we? Some kind of... I fucked it up. I
Yeah.
fucked it up.
Yeah, you fucked it up.
Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society, where we're ticking all the boxes and providing the much-needed minority perspective in popular internet discourse. I'm Matty, and I lead the film discussions.
I'm Josh, and I lead the music discussions.
So we've gotten some new viewers on all of our most recent videos, actually. So if you're coming over from one of those, or if you're a new listener now, feel free to subscribe and that kind of thing, and like to keep up with our new videos. And we have our social media channels on Instagram and Twitter. On Twitter, it's at Arts Minority, and on Instagram, it's at Minority Arts Podcast. But yeah, just to keep you updated with episodes, and subscribe if you've enjoyed the episodes you've heard so far. This week we're talking about I'm Thinking of Ending Things, Charlie Kaufman's new psychedelic existentialist film piece to add to his catalogue. But I think, given the date and recent events, I think it would be insane not to talk about the outcome of the US election.
It can pop. Oh,
Hell yeah.
that
Hell
one.
yeah, brother.
Pouring out for DT, Donald Trump. RIP. I hope you fucking burn in hell.
Yeah.
That being said, Maddie, you got some thoughts? Got some thoughts about our new president?
I have some thoughts about our new president. I would like to make it clear that I have some thoughts for our old president. All of them negative, okay? But I also have quite a few negative thoughts for our new president. I would also like to make it clear that I'm happy that the old president is gone, but also make it clear that it is okay to talk shit about the president of the United States at any time. You know?
Yeah, because we love being on a CIA hit list.
Yeah, that's my goal, right? Isn't that what this has all been about?
That's how I want to go out.
Yeah, why do you think this podcast is themed around being a minority? We're trying to take ourselves down from the start.
Very prolonged suicide attempt.
So the reason I talk like this is because I if any of our listeners, the handful of regular listeners that we have, are familiar with Lindsay Ellis, she tweeted something out that really pissed me off, if I'm honest. And in general, me and Josh have kind of become a bit disenfranchised with her as a kind of political commentator. Disillusioned would be the word, yeah. Well, she basically tweeted out, could everyone shut the fuck up about Joe Biden being bad for 5 minutes? And like, then she tweeted out basically like, it's okay to acknowledge that we have plenty of work to do, but also okay to acknowledge that we have a nice old man. She specifically used the phrase "nice old man" in the president's office now, and I have a major issue with that. First of all, I don't think it's a white woman's place to tell people to shut the fuck up about a racist person.
White, yeah, and to white cis as well, because
cis.
Yeah, the vice president is also involved, in Kamala Harris, in this kind of anti-democrat discussion, and yeah, we got one racist, one transphobe. It all works out.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And like, you know, I'm a woman too. Like, I'm not trying to say that like Lindsay Ellis isn't a victim of oppression by institutions.
It was a weird moment, like being on Instagram, because I everyone's putting up stories, all of my people in my social circle, and you know, I put up one that was just JPEG Mafia asking Kamala Harris why she won't let the people out of prison when she herself smokes weed. And then I was looking at other people's stories, you know, I didn't expect to see more angry shit, I guess, because they're so horrible, Biden and Harris, and everyone's just really happy and celebratory. And I guess part of it was just like, people just need hope. They just want to believe that like things are going to get better.
There's no actual practice there. These people just want to feel like everything's going to be okay. And the joy doesn't have to come from Biden being president. The joy can be not having Donald Trump in the presidency. That was exactly my
Yeah.
point. And it was exactly the point that the person who was sassing me, quote unquote, was like missing in my replies. I'm pretty sure that person was 15. Like I'm really not even trying to be like funny or
You don't want to
edgy.
dunk too hard on the accidentally 15-year-old.
Yeah, like you know
Yeah.
when you're talking to someone online and you're like you are too like stupid to actually be an adult. Like adults don't talk like this.
Yeah.
But like what I would say is that I I think people just yeah, you're right, it's a hope thing, but it's white middle class people, cis het people just wanting to go back to feeling like everything's going to be okay. And I saw
Hmm.
this really weird take that it's privileged people who are complaining about Biden and
Hmm.
like the reason they're complaining is that they're too privileged to notice the difference between a Trump and a Biden presidency.
Hmm.
But I
Oh,
think that
that's
so
so
gets to the
shit.
heart of liberal ignorance on these
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
It's that like yeah, things probably aren't going to get that better. Like of course people are going to suffer less under Biden than
Mm.
they are Donald Trump. It depends on which people in
Yeah.
which countries, but it's
It
true.
would be very fucking stupid to genuinely not think there's a difference between them. It's just
Yeah.
that the difference isn't enough.
No, exactly. And for some reason, pointing that out, despite the fact that he's already won and it is the people's jobs to hold the people in power to a higher standard,
Mm.
that's our fucking job, even if it's not our country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Apparently, making that comparison is already too inflammatory and is just you being a black pilled leftist. So, if you're doing this, please immediately stop, take a look at where you're coming from. If you're coming at it from the perspective of, hey, I just want hope, there is hope. Donald Trump is gone. You don't have to cling on to Joe Biden.
Mm. I do think the hope for me at least is coming from the communities I'm in and not from the boot from above.
Mhm.
It's seeing, great takes like yours and our boys Big Joel, the trans Twitter going off,
Mhm.
particularly communist trans Twitter, that's really popping off. Like just seeing my peers kind of that gives me hope. And I think one last thing I guess about hope is I'm pretty like disillusioned about this already celebratory post about the first black vice president, first woman black president as well.
Mhm.
Because one of the earliest memory I have of politics um is being woken up at 4 a.m. by my dad when I was 8 years old. And I didn't understand what was happening. And he rushed me downstairs and put on TV. And there was a man giving a speech in a microphone. And it was Obama. And it was his inaugural speech. And my dad was close to tears. And he says, everything's different now, Josh. There's a black man in presidency. And I really, for a moment, felt like I'm witnessing a monumental moment. And things might be different. Like, scary boogeyman racism might be gone. Like, this is a new age. And like 12 years later, seeing how Obama turned out and all the suffering he caused, like I'm completely fucking done with
Mhm.
tokenistic politics. And it's not enough that Kamala Harris is a black woman. She needs to be anti-imperialist. She needs to be like pro-trans ally. Like she can't just, that's not enough of a victory for me. That's not hope. So
Yeah.
that's the last thing I wanted to say, really.
I think it's really important. I think it's really important to say. But yeah, that's all our thoughts on the US election. Wonderful news. Just don't get too carried away because that's when things get dangerous.
Don't get complacent.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, then, we can now move on to our discussion of I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is, as I said before, Charlie Kaufman's new film, director of Anomalisa and Synecdoche, New York.
Mm.
I think it's definitely fair to call him an auteur at this point. Even with his body of writing works, those are pretty much more seen as Kaufman works than the people who actually directed those films, which I think is really interesting. I mean, you like have Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. That is a Kaufman film to people. But to get onto this film, I'm thinking of Ending Things is hard to break down into a simple podcast introduction, but I will do my best. And I think that is it is best summed up as a meditation on the implications of aging and existentialism and what that existentialism means for you as a person. I think also it's in a weird way a celebration of life, and I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. And so yeah, with that out of the way,
Can I have a crack at outlining the plot?
yeah, go for it.
It's really interesting that you took the grandest themes from this film as a start, and I agree with you that all of them there. But for me, as well as those themes, this really did hit me as like a visceral bad date movie. Like in terms of like, I can't express enough how much this film feels like the worst relationships I've been in. And like just about being unhappy in a relationship on like the most low level kind of reading of this. I think it hits that really well. And yeah, it's a film about it's a meet the parents film. Just like the what's the name of the man?
Ben Stiller?
Scorsese's boy, Ben Stiller, and Goodfellas man, fucking Irishman.
Joe Pesci?
Not Joe Pesci.
Robert De Niro?
Robert De Niro.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like De Niro's Meet the Fockers, but like really horrible and sad. Yeah, you know, boyfriend takes girlfriend to meet the parents, and then she watches the parents slowly age and die, you know, decades within a night time. And then they go get some ice cream, and then they hang out in a high school. That's the plot of this film.
That is the plot.
But yeah, like Matty said, it's all very surrealist and heightened. I assume if you're listening, I assume you've seen it or quite aware of it.
And okay, with that said, I'm just gonna dive right in. So, I think with the nature of this film and the discussion around it, as we sort of talked about in the beginning, it's impossible to escape talking about this film without approaching it with questions of intention and consequently meaning. And the reason I'm starting off this way is because I'm annoyed at myself. I'm annoyed with how I approached this film the first time I watched it, because I went in looking to pick things apart and let that determine how I felt. And I forgot that that's not how I work.
What did you mean by pick things apart?
I wanted to take the elements of the film, study them, and then like let the conclusions of that lead that to how I feel. But like I said, I forgot that that's like not how I work, and I don't think that that's how things like this should be approached. Because on watching it a second time, I was struck by something that reminded me profoundly of myself and my own anxieties, not because I figured out the film, but because I turned my brain off and let the gestures of what I was experiencing provoke things in me.
You let left brain take the reins.
Exactly. I it's like that letterbox list. Think, don't feel. But I think that list gives some shitty movies a pass. Anyway, the voice of this film to me is clearly a nihilistic one, but I don't think that comes from a place of a distaste for life, kind of rather a love for it, or at least the idea of what life can be. And that voice just seems to be crying out for meaning and crying out at the fear of losing that meaning and excitement as you age. There's so much to praise in this film's visuals, but I want to highlight the framing for my point here. The aspect ratio, which is kind of immediately striking, it's a very small feeling film because of it. It allows for this particular shot used a few times in the first half of the movie, not so much in the second half at all. And it's sort of somewhere between a medium shot and a close-up. with like a lot of negative space above the character. It's kind of like the shot in the poster, but with the character a bit more full in the frame. And what this shot does is it brings the state of the character, usually Jessie Buckley's character, to the forefront, but simultaneously removes them from the setting, and it cuts you off from them as a character. And I think what this really does is tap into the horror of this film. That horror not being aging itself, but the fear of the places and the states that aging will bring you to because of the inherent dissociations from reality that it will bring. And you can see it all right there in that character in those moments. And I think all of this is out of an innocent, unabashed love for life, not as cynical, pretentious, like strive for meaning as I think it's easy to knock this film for being. So yeah, that's how I experienced the behemoth that is I'm thinking of ending things.
That's interesting. This is gonna be a fascinating discussion because I feel like we both got very different things out of this film. I think I'd argue. I think both would be valid. I think it's a dense film, and it would mean something different to everyone.
Yeah.
I hope. I guess I'll start off by saying, of the 3 films that Charlie Kaufman has directed, Synecdoche, New York being his debut, then followed by Anomalisa, then this. This is the worst film he's directed. That being said, I think this one's amazing, and it's my favorite film that's come out this year. And Charlie Kaufman is a god. I don't know. He can't make a bad film, I don't think. And yeah, I do think he's the best screenwriter working in Hollywood. In America, like the American screenwriter.
Yeah, no, I get you.
I know he's Canadian. I don't know how Canadians feel about being called American.
It's like I mean Hitchcock was English, but yeah.
But yeah, for me, a lot of this film was very much about kind of deconstructing male gaze, and not in a sexual way, but more so in like a soft boy way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like this podcast, we've just had our Paul Thomas Anderson episode, and I was thinking about David Foster Wallace today as well. All these kind of like artsy, emotional men who are quite abusive towards women and misogynistic, and in their actions in their life. And I think this is a film that really deconstructs like how a sensitive, quote unquote, nice guy can be misogynistic. And I felt that a lot of this film, if you're focusing on Jesse's character, was kind of about how men project fantasies onto women and kind of use women as banks for kind of affirmation and recognition, and a sense of self-worth, and how that can be really empty and damaging. And I thought that was really moving. And kind of a lot of the confusing, disorienting elements of this film kind of came together for me when I came to the conclusion that that's kind of what I think it's saying about gender dynamics and relationships. Like there's this big thing in this film where Jessie Buckley's character. By the way, Jessie Buckley, I adore her. She reminds me a lot of Linda Cardellini.
That's a really good comparison.
And how her face moves.
Yeah.
But her name changes a lot throughout the film. And I think while there is a sort of weird persona thing where their identities merge, and we could maybe get into that if that ends up coming up more, there is also a thing of like, I think she is different people throughout the film. In a really weird dreamlike way, in terms of like, based on the book, and we don't have to be beholden to the book, but if we do take this film as kind of being in a bit in Jesse's head, we may disagree on how much it is, but if we're taking some of it as being from his perspective, like how he thinks about women, you kind of get the sense that she's like an amalgamation of the women he's been with. Because there's this stuff about like she says she hates poetry, she's not into like wordy stuff, and then she like tells him a poem that she wrote.
Yeah, Oh, it's so hard because both the actors' first names are Jesse. The guy
Jesse Plemons,
Jesse Plemons
my boy.
says he's amazing. He says the title of a William Wordsworth poem.
Yeah.
And she's like, Jesus, that's a long title. That's practically the length of a poem. And then 2 minutes later, she recites a about 3 minute long poem that she's written. And very quickly, because I don't want to derail what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think what that shows about this film is this wonderful irony it has. This wonderful self-awareness.
It to me does have a dreamlike quality of like thinking about your history of relationships and like catching these patterns. Like, yeah, because she's a like physicist, a painter, a poet,
film critic.
Like, it's very clear that these aren't like this isn't a straight single person. And yeah, and to reinforce my point that in some ways she symbolizes the narcissistic male gaze of women. There's a thing about like how rom-coms give us like an idealized version of love, and there's a really funny joke about a rom-com being directed by like Zemeckis.
Oh, so funny.
And the woman playing the redhead in the rom-com is actually Colby Minifie from The Boys fame. She's amazing in The Boys. And yeah, and then at some point Colby Minifie replaces Jessie Buckley in the car, and it's clear that like again he's projecting this kind of perfect rom-com woman onto her.
Yeah.
But I also think Jessie Buckley's character is very much real. I'm not saying she isn't real. I'm just saying in the surrealist fashion of this film, it's cool thinking of that metaphor. So that's one angle that this film really hit me on, but it can be read in so many ways.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think I absolutely noticed that angle too. And I think on the way to realizing why this film was hitting me, it was that narrative it was building up around the idea of this woman being enforced upon her, because I think what that brings up is the fear of like aging so well. This idea of like growing older and like becoming not really a person and becoming just a victim of your environment, having people just completely tell you who you are all of your life. There's a lot of musings on like whether or not you can really have an original thought in this film. I think what this brings up is actually really interestingly the damage that the male gaze has on forcing people into boxes and the massive consequences it has for how people view their own lives. Because if we're essentially being kept in these boxes all of our lives, we never get to understand who we are, but also we never really get to understand why we want to be a person in the first place. And I think that's what this film is like. It's what's so beautiful about this film is that there is this, like I said, voice inside of it just screaming out to be understood. And I think Charlie, like, I think the film does an amazing job of just humanizing itself in a strange way.
I think like kind of from Jessie Buckley's point of view, even though I am a man, so I should be related to Jesse Plemons more, I really did relate to Jessie Buckley the most in this film. Kind of the and this isn't like as heady or philosophical, but just on a visceral, like taking this as a romance horror film, the feeling of being in like a dead end relationship and knowing you're not really happy, but you kind of like, but it's kind of okay. It's like it's fine. She's like the sex is okay, and he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And just going along with it, and that is like a very, and she has moments in this film where, you know, she's like walking down the stairs, and it's just like, and it loops her walking down, just as almost like out of body, kind of like depersonalized, just letting life happen to you, in an unhappy relationship. Like that was very visceral. But then, like you said, the theme of feeling boxed in as a woman. There's a great part at the end where she has a rant about how she always says yes because it's easier than saying no.
Yeah.
And these really subtle, frustrating gender stuff. But even though it's so scathing, like you said, it's such a charitable film to its characters. It likes its characters, and I don't think Jesse Plemons I think there's hope that we as viewers who can be like Jesse Plemons' character can be better. But
Yeah.
even if this character is doomed, like I don't think he ever learns his lesson. I do think this film is still really charitable to Jesse Plemons' character. We feel for him, but we want him to be better, and he never gets there. And just some points where this kind of happens is him as an old man working in the school is very like heartfelt and warm. As well as like the mother's role in this film, Toni Collette, beautiful Toni Collette, amazing. Talking about how he's always worked so hard, but he never really made it. He was never really smart, and you see that in his relationship with Jessie Buckley. Like he projects this anxiety that people think he's dumb. Like on the bit where she becomes a film critic and like changes her voice to sound like a film critic, and he's sitting there like an idiot, and there's so many parts where he awkwardly just like quotes things because he so badly wants her to think he's smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love shit like that.
Another really important moment, I think, is the fact that he is effectively given the film's mission statement. I think, for at least for me, like I said, I think this film is just screaming out at the horror of like losing the importance and the value in life. And he has this amazing short moment where he just starts breaking down in tears as they're driving back from their mother's house, saying like it's all lies. They tell you it will get better. They tell you everything will be okay, and it just never does. It never gets better. And like then you have it's amazing, and because you have Jessie Buckley's character next to him just saying platitudes all. And like she's this kind, she immediately transforms into this kind of like spiritual figure almost, of like sitting down and playing chess with death kind of thing, and just conversations about meaning in the universe and what your life was actually worth. She stops being herself, and so it transports her to this kind of more ethereal character for a second, and it's amazing. And I think this film really shows its hand in its anxieties towards life, in how it kind of treats things that are kind of, I don't want to say shallow, or like, I don't want to make this film sound like a pretentious art student, like who's like nothing with meaning bad, but there's this like, I think the conversations like the one at the dinner table about like paintings, because in this scene Jessie Buckley's character is a painter, and she's talking about how you can make a painting feel sad, and it's hard to like know exactly how you're doing that as an artist, but the characters around the table are kind of saying, especially like Jesse Plemons' dad, are saying like, oh, I like paintings that just look like reality. And I think this is a really important topic, because I think we should never, Big Joel has a really amazing video essay about this, we should never try to make art less meaningful than it already has become. If art already wasn't this hugely essential piece of reflection on human existence, then we wouldn't have to fight so hard for it. But we already have this amazing tool to highlight certain aspects of our existence, and so it's dangerous to deny that. And in this scene, you basically have this conversation about that. And like I said, I think this is a film really showing its hand about like what the film's voice is scared of becoming. Because I use the term the film's voice because the protagonist of this film is so like metaphysical in a way. So you have the fear of life becoming nothing is just completely etched onto the screen here.
Yeah, I think what you said about the painting scene, I do agree that was a very like mission statement moment, because Jessie Buckley's character explains that she tries to write from the point of view of a perspective and like what it's like, the feeling of looking at a landscape, and she draws the landscape from that feeling. And David Thewlis character like very funnily mocks that. But yeah, that is definitely, I think, what Kaufman's doing of this. And can I tell you? Can I tell you the plot? Like spoil the twist in the book that this is adapted from.
I think I read the synopsis of the book a while ago. I've actually forgotten though.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting, because the book this is adapted from, of the same name by Ian Reid, is very similar plot, but it's very clear. It's more of a Fight Club kind of thing where it distinctly tells you like what is happening, and it's not as surrealist.
It's
So the big Fight Club moment in the book is the whole story is these kids like reading kind of the journals of this old janitor, and it's telling the story, of his girlfriend and taking her home and all this weird stuff that happens, right? But then the big twist at the end is the janitor kind of it goes in this weird place. The janitor walks into the room with his girlfriend. She says, "I'm thinking of ending things," and then he gives her a hanger, and she stabs herself in the neck of it and like leaves to death. And then he says, "A single unit, back to one, me, only me, Jake alone again." So it's revealed that this was all a big delusion. He failed at education. He became a janitor. His parents died when he was a few years ago, and he made up this fantasy about this woman. And that was what this whole story has been. And in the book, it's very like clear cut. That is what happens in a very like Fight Club way. So it's interesting that like Kaufman took elements of that story, but tried his best to not make it clear cut that Jessie Buckley is a figment of Jesse Plemons' imagination. And I think it's super interesting because it does give you the effect of a lot of this can be taken not so much as trying to piece together the quote unquote plot of the film, but just as like emotional, like this is what this feels like. And also it lets Jessie Buckley be a real person. I think in this film she is a real person. I don't think she's like a figment of his imagination. I just think presentation shows you through how he sees her sometimes. But yeah, she gets those amazing monologues, like you said, where it's clear that she's also real in the sense that you can't do like a weird plot thing where it's just Fight Club. She's not real. Like they're both in my mind real. It's just being presented in a very surreal way. So yeah, I just think it's really interesting how he adapted it to allow for that kind of maneuverability, that interpretation, make it more open-ended.
Definitely. I love that Jessie Buckley's character is more of a real person, mainly because I do think the film is kind of going for a sense of tragedy to some extent. I think you are meant to feel in some way that if both of these people had been allowed to be true, fully fledged people, then this could be something wonderful. I think the ballet sequence is simultaneously a parody of their relationship, but also the version of their relationship that is possible if people weren't forced into these existential questions. I think like the presence of these existential questions in themselves is what provokes these people to crumble. It forces Jessie Buckley's character to deject herself into ideas that she's not good enough, and it forces Jesse Plemons' character into delusions of grandeur and turning his girlfriend into something that she's not. Not that she's not great, but that she's this amazing, like the very essence of womanhood, essentially. And so I think, the reason that Jessie Buckley's character is more of a person is because I think that's what this film is ultimately lamenting, is the fact that with the concerns that we have over making our lives mean something and the things that put us in the position to ask those questions stop us from having the actual real life experiences that make life worth living.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of what holds them both back is, in a way, I do think this is more Jesse Plemons' story because I think it's his faults that make them both miserable. And in the sense that I think the final scene sort of says it all of like maybe if Jesse / men could kind of learn to love themselves and let go of kind of that insecurity that craves to take someone captive and have them validate you, that the other person could be free, right? Like, and love us freely. And I think the ending of this film really says it all with where Jesse Buckley's character is reduced to a member of the audience who will clap Jesse Plemons on and tell him he's great, he's so great. And there's that really miserable line again. It's so touching. He says, "You are all my reasons," about her. This idea that of just being so, like you said, like there's all these existential stuff, crises and whatnot. And for Jesse Plemons, the only way to deal with it is to put it all into one girl, the manic pixie dream girl thing, and say that is the meaning of life, and that's the person in the crowd who's cheering me on, and that's what validates me. And it maybe if Jesse could just learn to love himself, he wouldn't be so toxic, and we wouldn't have this film. So I think that's kind of the message I took from this personally.
Yeah, no, I completely see how you would have got that. I want to just before the end also like talk about the benefits of rewatching this film, because I also think this film brings up really interesting questions of like, what's it all about? Like, I think every now and again, a film comes along that is puzzling and doesn't immediately open itself up to the viewer, and there is this kind of like zeitgeist almost around like discerning the kernel of truth at the center of the film. And I always think rewatching is a really interesting part of like deconstructing that, because I think there's like huge problems with that idea, as is well documented. I think the first thing that I found immediately impactful on rewatch was like everything had less weight. I was paying much less attention to everything. I think this film, because has such little regard for reality, as a viewer, you're constantly trying to pay attention to every time it breaks reality and kind of establish some set of rules. But when you watch this film for a second time and you know that it's not leading to anything so much, it's not leading to a grand realization that, like this was like the space-time continuum was ruptured in this way. This character is this character, and oh, it turns out that the girl was really the guy, or you know what I mean? Like, it's this film has absolutely no regard for reality. Everyone essentially could be the other character, and it wouldn't mean anything. So I think that was something that really opened me up to the more like emotional provocations of the film the second time around. Which was why I think I enjoyed it so much more. And secondly, and it's sort of like a less important point, but I think the humor of this film really shined.
It's hilarious. Right?
It's so funny the second time around. Like maybe not so much the second half, but the first half, man, that fucking Robert Zemeckis sketch, and all the stuff with Toni Collette and
Toni Collette.
like when Toni Collette like reaches out to like cuddle Jesse Plemons' cheek, and he just like fuck off, and he's so uncomfortable the whole time. It is so funny.
The part where she jokes about how David Thewlis is a really big dick.
yeah, it's so horrible. And you're right, it works. This film works so viscerally well as like a, oh fuck, I hate this relationship, and here I am meeting his awful parents film. But yeah, we're running out of time, so if you want to, you can do your closing thoughts and recommendation, then I'll just do mine.
Yeah, so I mean, overall, I'd give this a strong recommend. I really adored this film, and it's exceedingly miserable, quite nihilistic at points, maybe. But I think I don't think this film has hope in it per se, but it inspires hope outside of it in a weird way. Like when the film ends, I take it as a cautionary tale of like, I can be better than this. Like we can be better than this. And that was what really kind of moved me by the end. I do think this is a wonderful, dense, fun film full of bleakness. But yeah, I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, strong recommend.
Sweet. Yeah, I would also give this a really strong recommend. I'm really glad I came round on it. I think you're definitely right to call this a nihilistic film, but I think again this is what's so fascinating to me about this film and what reminds me so much of myself in this film is that it's nihilistic out of a love for life. It's not nihilistic out of a sense of displeasure at the fact of having to live a life. It's nihilistic from a place of despair at the realities of existence versus what we have been promised and what could have been if we only could have been better, which we never truly could be. Um, so yeah, I think this is a really meaningful film, and I think when watching this, put your emotions first. Don't look for meaning. Look for the emotions, and in your emotions is the meaning. It's not the other way around. So yeah, I give this a really strong recommend. And that wraps it up for our I'm Thinking of Ending Things review.
Next week we are doing another music episode, and we're doing a review of going back to Fiona Appleland, The Idler Wheel. The full title is The Idler Wheel is wiser than the driver of the screw, and whipping cords will serve you more than ropes will ever do. So
She got away with words.
That
wasn't sarcasm, but it is just funny how good it is.
So yeah, we're doing that next week, and
Sweet.
I'm super excited. I love that album.
Me too. I've always got more room for Fiona Apple.
Mm.
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week then with our discussion of Fiona Apple's The Idler Wheel. Goodbye.
The genus genius. Genus edition. That's it. That was a joke. Goodbye, everyone.